So I'm Kalamali.
And I'm Nara. Thanks. Thanks for all coming today. And Asha, of course. It's wonderful to have you here.
We're really glad everyone could come, and we'll be looking forward to our dear friend and guide Asha, who's here and has done so much to share Yogananda's teachings and her beautiful example of discipleship, as well as all of the seva she's done for Swami Kriyananda over the years. And we're just really lucky to be with her again. And we just thought we'd just share a few things before we start. We are really lucky because with the energy that's happening down here on this side of the world, we're having some retreats coming up. And Kavita just wanted to share one in Rotorua, and that'll be in August. And so you want to help me with that?
Yeah.
So she's going to be a great person to contact if you're interested in getting together with some of the Guru Bhais in New Zealand. And then there'll be another retreat opportunity in September around the weekend of Swami's discipleship anniversary. And we'll be holding something here in New South Wales. And so if you're interested in more information, you can let us know. And then just one little last joyful announcement is that we're really lucky to have Asha do these satsangs with us, and we'll be sharing with all of you when the next ones are, more in the fall as opportunities arise. So thank you again for being here. And just one little thing about Zoom.
Yeah, just as always with Zoom, if everyone could just put themselves on mute as they come in, and we'll control it. We're going to allow some time, as usual, at the end for a bit of question and answer time with Asha, which everyone really looks forward to. But if everyone, as they're going, could type in their questions to the chat, and then we can sort of, because often we find that a few people have the same sort of questions, so we can kind of group them together and make it more efficient. And I think I'm not sure when you mentioned it, but Asha is going to be talking today on energy in the age of energy and magnetism. So that was kind of the feedback that we got last time from Asha's wonderful talk.
Yes.
So a bit of a flow, but we're going to hand over to Asha to lead us in a prayer, and then we're going to have a nice, beautiful song, and then get straight into sharing Asha's wisdom.
All right. Let's pray together. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, beloved Master, Paramhansa Yogananda, saints of all religions, friend and guide Swami Kriyananda, humbly we bow to you all. Guide us in our satsang today, that we may open our hearts and our minds to the transforming power of your wisdom and your love. We live in this world only to be your channels. Guide us and bless us that in all ways we hear your inner voice and follow your inner guidance and live in your light. Om. Peace. Amen. Well, that was a treat. Thank you for that. I don't think I've ever heard that with the cello like that. That was so beautifully done when he stopped bowing and started plucking it. It's just, anyway, that was gorgeous. Thank you. All right, my friends. We're going to talk about magnetism and energy, which is really one of the fundamental teachings of all of life, of self-realization, and very specifically of what Master came to teach us. So it is by no means a secondary consideration, but is actually the heart of everything, which is nice. It's nice to get a simple template that you can just lay over your spiritual life and have a really clear guideline. So I hope I can help you with that. When the masters, when the avatars come over and over again, as they do, they don't make up new teaching, because if it's all eternity and infinity and omniscience, it's not like they can come in with a new eternity or a new infinity. It just is what it is. But the way the masters teach, it varies enormously. So that's why people get confused and think that my Lord Jesus Christ taught something that the pagan Krishna could never have taught. And whoever you're loyal to, because you do see these superficial differences, it's hard to understand. It's the way Master explained it, which is just a wonderful way to think about it, is that the teaching is always the same, but the way they present it depends on the context in which they have incarnated. And what goes with that is the specific needs of their disciples, even the specific needs of their disciples in that incarnation, not even speaking generationally. When Master talked about past lives, he talked about being William the Conqueror, and the conqueror being the operative word there. He was a soldier. He took all his soldiers across the English Channel. He was at war for many years. He talked about being a Spanish king. Swami is convinced he was Ferdinand III. Ferdinand III drove the Moors out of Spain and saved Spain for the Christian religion, which apparently was an important thing to do. In that incarnation, he was at war for 26 years, basically. His entire kingship was he was at war. And it crossed my mind the other day, especially when I got to know some warrior-like young men recently who have a very strong association with being soldiers. As one man put it to me, he was 30 at the time he said this. He said, I got very good at dying for my spiritual path. He said, but my incarnation was usually over by the time I was 25. I just threw myself fearlessly into the fray and was nice and dead and then just went on. He said, now I'm 30 and there's no way to die for it. He said, now I have to figure out how to live for it. And it was actually like a real challenge for him. How do I make a life? I mean, I never thought about that. I've been female for so many incarnations and I just don't have much of the, big sword sort of thing. It's not part of me. But a lot of Master's disciples did. And so he came in to be a warrior because Babaji sent him. But also he needed all those people needed to have those incarnations. So Master actually also said, quote, Lahiri Mahashaya was lucky because in his entire incarnation, there was no war, where Master said there were 3, World War I, II, and the Korean War in Master's life. So it's just like same teaching, same realization, but all really different. So most of what Master taught was just a re-expression. That's how he put it. When Swami said, is this a new religion? He said, no, but it's a new expression. When I lived at Ananda village for the first 10, 15 years almost, and especially during the first 10 years, we were very, very simple. And our lives were very simple. And I lived up at the seclusion retreat for a long time. And we didn't even have gravel on the paths. It was just this fine dust. And we went around in Indian clothes with Indian names and barefoot in the summer, just walking on those soft, dusty paths. It was very hard when they put gravel down on those paths. One, because it went crunch, 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 crunch. So whenever anybody walked by, all of a sudden you'd hear them going crunch, 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 where it had been silent before, and you couldn't go barefoot because it was all gravel. I mean, that was sort of like, that was a big influx of civilization, was that you had to wear shoes because the paths were graveled. But I thought we were Indian. And in 1986, I went to India. What I mean by that is I thought we were Hindu. I somehow thought what we were doing was Hinduism. I went to India in 1986 and actually saw Hinduism. I'd never seen it before, with the temples and the worships and the ceremonies. And I realized that Master's teaching was about as Hindu as it was Catholic, which was to say, not very. You could kind of see little bits and pieces, but it just didn't match either one. And I really understood what Master said. It's a new expression. The original teachings of Jesus, the original teachings of Krishna, put into something special for the West, or for the Western orientation, however you would think about that. America, Australia are very similar in our dedication to equality, to self-reliance, to I can be anything I want to be. As Master said, in India, they actually understand these teachings. So when you suggest that you can realize God, they say, oh yeah, maybe someday, but my karma, there's just kind of this like, sure, that's what you say, but really, we're not really going to do it. He said Americans were so completely uninformed, basically. The Master would say, you can realize God. And Americans said, yes, we can do it. Yes, we can do it. Because we were just accustomed to doing it. And so it set the tone in a very different way, which is why he had to come out of India in order to really launch this, so that there would be this, I can do it. Of course we can do it. Why would we not be able to? And we don't have the baggage of all of those generations of thinking about it. Pruning the tree is how Swami put it. Pruning the tree of Hinduism, pruning the tree of Christianity to get back to what the avatars wanted. Now, that's part of it. And the other part of it is that, of course, this is a big transition between Kali Yuga and Dwapara Yuga. And Kali Yuga is the age of matter, is the age of fixed form, and Dwapara Yuga is the age of energy. There's a few basic ideas that it will serve you, if you haven't already, to put out the energy to really try to understand them. Karma, reincarnation, the chakras, and the yugas. And this is not quite apart from Kriya and inner life. This is something different. This is to understand how the world works and why. It's for the part of us that has to interface with the creation around us. There's a wonderful book from Crystal Clarity called The Yugas, which is about the rising and falling of enlightenment and shrinking down into less enlightenment on the planet. It's an astronomical phenomenon, not even astrology, but astronomy, as our solar system moves closer and farther away from the center of our galaxy. The energy flow toward our planet increases. And then as we begin to orbit away from that, it decreases. 24,000 year cycle it takes to orbit. So the nadir on this planet was 500 AD. Jesus was born nearly at the bottom, because the planetary drama is literally the painted backdrop for the real drama, which is the individual soul gradually coming to enlightenment. And the soul can come to enlightenment in any yuga. It just depends on what we need. We're in the astral world. We have karma we have to work out. And we just look around the giant material world and we find a planet that has the conditions that are good for us. And the conditions right now are that we are breaking out of Kali Yuga and we are breaking into Dwapara Yuga. Dwapara started, this transition started in 1700, and then America was founded and the country you live in, all these things happened. And then 1900 was the real turning point. And the characteristic of the age of energy is that fixed forms no longer define us, but we are concerned with the actual vibration of energy. So one of the first consequences of that is all our neat little fixed forms are breaking to pieces. Religion, morality, just a second, I lost the thought for a second. Marriage, gender. I mean, whoever thought gender was mutable, but even gender now is mutable. Just everything is mutable. Generations do not follow one upon the other. You read most astonishing stories like, 5 generations in India were all itinerant storytellers. Now this generation has all gone to Mumbai to drive taxis. It's like, it's just gone. And all of us have watched professions just vaporize. I remember when there was this little film development shop where we used to take the film from our cameras to be developed. And this little family had this nice little business. There it was. It vaporized. I mean, so many things have vaporized. Books are nearly vaporizing, although they're making a slight comeback at this point. Just all of it doesn't take long to figure out. Okay. So what Master came to bring for this time and place was also, how are we devotees in an age of energy? In an age of form, it was really obvious. If you were serious, you became a monk or you became a nun. And you lived impoverished. You lived in a tiny cell without any heat. You didn't eat very much. You didn't sleep very much. It was all like, I need to show that I'm separated from this world, so I will repudiate all the things of this world. You go to the Himalayas, you go to the caves, you go to the desert. In Jesus's time, it was Kali Yuga descending. There were 5 more centuries before it even turned, and then it was pretty dark. They just repudiated the world. They just walked away from it. The desert fathers, they just went out. St. Anthony, he spent how many decades? The final decades he spent like in an abandoned tomb somewhere. I mean, that's about as like repudiating this life as you can possibly imagine. But nowadays, weirdly, even the traditional monasteries and ashrams, they're not attracting people. It's the secret scandal of the Catholic world that, there's not enough priests, and the nuns whose whole life was based on the young nuns taking care of the old nuns, it's just zip. You have these huge monasteries, you used to have hundreds, and you literally will have a dozen elders in it. But it's not that people don't want to be spiritual. It's that form doesn't hold anymore. So the good news is we're not bound by those forms anymore. The bad news is we don't have those forms anymore. And so what's happening to us is that we are being forced to define our spiritual life, our every life, every aspect of life. We have to define it not according to what it looks like, but according to what it actually is. Now, this is the good news and this is the bad news. Now, what we also see in the world right now is we see this huge, intense reaction to the dissolution of form. And it's being acted out in the USA, especially. I don't know your political scene as much, but it seems to be acting out all over the world. People are just desperately trying all the things that I just said were mutable. They're desperately trying to assert them all, every one of them. Marriage means this, education means this, society means this, race means this, religion means this. And this incredible fight is going on and will continue to go on. Fundamentalists, the Taliban rushing through and taking all the women out of education and just everything. You can see it all. But if you think of it in terms of the yugas, you see that's why it's so important to know this. because then you don't just panic. You see, okay, this is a natural growing pain. And there were people in an age, in a transition, a yuga transition, especially from Kali to Dwapara, a lot of stuff gets to be destroyed. So all of Divine Mother's rowdy children who like to destroy stuff, when they were in the astral world and they were looking for a place where they could work out their karma, they thought, I'll go to planet Earth because we get to destroy stuff. We get to be crazy, violent mobs tearing things to pieces because they need the experience to do that. They need to try out and see if that's going to make them happy. And we apparently needed to be in the company of such demonic people so that we could learn not to be afraid. And so that we could learn also to trust God and to love all of Divine Mother's children, even if we might have to stand up and battle them, that we can do it without hatred. Now, I started to say at the beginning of this, in this context, Master made an original contribution to the science of yoga. At least I never heard him say at all that this was drawn from any age in the past. And that is what is appropriately called the energization exercises, which no other religious tradition does anything like this. Whereas the Kriya Yoga practice, Master said, Jesus practiced Kriya and taught it to his disciples or something very close to it. The Om technique is the main technique for many, many other spiritual growth groups. So as Swami said when he was teaching Hong Sa, publishing it in a book, he said 3/4 of the people on the subcontinent of India know the mantra and practice it. There's nothing secret to be kept here. I mean, those are our fundamental practices. And even the name Kriya just means action. It's not unique. It's just what we do because that's how it works. But the energization was an original contribution. 12 minutes of movements that you do with your body. But what you're actually doing is we are teaching ourselves that we have access to an unlimited flow of energy. And that the only obstacle to having energy is our concentration, our vibration, and our understanding of how that energy works. Now, how all of this, the energization exercises, some people practice them, I was going to say religiously, let's use the word faithfully, practice them faithfully and regularly from the time that they learn them. Some people don't figure out how important they are. So the first thing I just want to do is give a little pitch for the energization exercises, for us to really deeply understand that understanding energy is the core of Master's mission. And just understanding energy is the beginning of Dwapara Yuga. And it's not that we're going to live long enough to really have it matter what yuga we're in, but there is, as Swamiji put it, this flow of energy coming into the planet right now, and everyone is feeling it. And those of us who are relating to a greater reality recognize that we can use that energy to raise our consciousness and to raise the consciousness of the world by helping others, by doing good works. He said others feel that energy coming in and they're trying to take it to their egos. And they're trying to use that energy to hold on to whatever their ego identity is. That's why the conflicts are getting so intense, because the conflicts are also being energized, because everybody's being energized right now. So the more we can consciously attune ourselves to that energy, and part of what the energization exercises do, they teach us to increase energy at will, and they also teach us to direct that energy at will. Because, I mean, little children have lots of energy, they just don't know what to do with it. One of those silly little films that you see on the internet, I love the ones that have children usually. I mean, they're always so much fun. There's this father and he's filming his son, and his son is about 3. And he's talking to his son about how many cookies were there on the plate and how many of the cookies on the plate did you actually eat? And the little boy is about 3 or 4, so he's vague on the details. You know, he knew that he ate a lot of cookies, and gradually it comes out that there was something like a dozen cookies on the plate, and the little boy ate all the cookies on the plate. And so then the father has a little conversation about whether eating 12 cookies had an effect on his energy. And the little boy assures us that it did not. Now, of course, when you get to the end, the entire time, the little boy is just going like this. He never stops for the whole conversation. He's like a human pogo stick. Do you think eating 12 cookies affected you? He just goes up and down and up and down. Now, a lot of grown-ups live pretty much like that. They have lots of energy, but they're just a human pogo stick. I actually met a bank clerk once. I think everybody has a center, but I'm not sure that she did. I really am not sure that she actually had a point of origin. I think she was just an object in motion that was absolutely rooted nowhere. I'd scarcely ever met such a restless, Rajasic person. She wasn't unpleasant. She was just like that little boy. She was just a human pogo stick. So it's not just quantity, it's also quality and the capacity to direct it. Now, here is the other part of it that is just, if we can just get these ideas in our head, it helps so much. This is an energy universe. And it's like, this was Einstein's big revelation. And everybody can say this. Oh, Einstein discovered that matter is just a form of energy. And we all can say that. But we don't actually operate that way. There was a cartoon in the New Yorker magazine that I saw printed up somewhere once. Remember magazines? They were paper. They were, stapled together like this. Yeah, we all know. Okay, it was in a magazine, and it was a scene on a corner of like New York City. For some reason, that's what it looked like, and there were all these different people sort of outside. Like there was the cab driver. There was a woman pushing a baby carriage. There was a man cleaning the street. There was a woman leaning out the window, and she was talking to her neighbor. Every single person in the cartoon looked very thoughtful, like they were contemplating something serious. And then there was a quote from Albert Einstein: mankind will have to gradually accustom himself to an energy concept of the universe. And you realize that all those people were accustoming themselves to an energy concept of the universe. But of course, it was a brilliant and very important statement, because we often give tremendous energy to the external aspect of what we're doing. And it's not that we shouldn't pay attention to it, but we fail to understand that creation is triple, it's threefold. You have the causal, you have the astral, and then you have the material. The causal is the level of ideas, the astral is the level of energy, and the material is, even though it appears to us to be the biggest and most significant part of everything we're doing, it actually begins on the causal level, is created by the application of energy, and then finally, when all of that is done, it manifests. And yet we often pay less attention to our actual inner thoughts about things than we do about the way everything looks. And even in the world we're living in now, where there's so much to be concerned about, it's just like every time you end up in any conversation with someone who's either Ukrainian or Russian, you really begin to realize that there's a very different reality, creeping into our world. And people we know, people you can call on the telephone and talk to, or talk to on Zoom, just as we're doing. I did a satsang for our Ananda Russian devotees. And, the master has some very severe predictions about the future of Russia, which is not positive. And so, there they are asking, what are we going to do? I don't know. I don't know any of this. But by the time it manifests as physical, a whole lot of things have already happened. which is to say, whatever is going to happen next is being created right now. It just hasn't yet come out on the energy field, which is to say, the ideas we have about things, the quantity and quality of energy that we are putting out, that's what's going to determine what happens. Yes, of course, you have to be practical with your money. You have to think about these things. We have our ambitions. We want to build. We want to do this. All of that has to be done too. But what is really determining our destiny, spiritually, physically, emotionally, every way you can think of, is now we can talk about it. You see, this was always true. It's not like in Kali Yuga, energy wasn't the deciding factor. It was just in Kali Yuga, nobody had any idea what energy was. Things were just things. Now, of course, to his most advanced disciples, Jesus would teach exactly what Yogananda would teach. But what we're dealing with now, because it's a rising age, we have discovered the energy nature of the universe, and therefore it's common parlance. Everybody can talk about it. The bottom of consciousness has risen up to the point where we can talk about energy, where Jesus could only hint at it because people just didn't understand. But Master can talk about it directly. So that means that we have the advantage of knowing, oh, it's who I am inside that really matters. And where is it said? Was it Jesus who said? Is it in the Bible where it says, he who commits adultery in his heart has already sinned? Something awful like that that makes people really, really upset to hear it. You know, he tried to put it in some kind of, maybe it was Moses who said it, I can't remember now, but whoever said it put the fear of God in everyone for a really long time, you know. But it wasn't really that he was trying to make everyone feel terrible. It was that he was trying to say, just because it doesn't manifest doesn't mean that it doesn't affect your destiny. Now, this is the scary part, and it is a scary part because it makes us responsible not just for what other people can see, it makes us responsible for who and what we actually are. Now, this is also the good news, because the only thing we're really responsible for is who and what we actually are. I had this great learning moment, which was not a pleasant one. I was probably back in the 70s when I was still at Ananda Village. And I had the idea at that time, which I have since gotten over to a large extent, that if I had something corrective to say to someone, they actually wanted me to say it. I have no idea how I decided that, but somehow I decided that. A woman friend of mine started helping me by saying, Asha, and she was a very good friend. She said, you explain my problems to me more clearly than I want to know them. That's how she put it to me. So I thought to myself, who am I serving? You know, I'm just like, I could say this alone in my room. Like, if she doesn't want to know, what good does it do me? But in that context, I'd had this encounter with this individual, a male person, as it were. And he had presented something to me, and I had spoken frankly about what I thought about it. And we were all very involved with Swami Kriyananda at that time. Everything was very informal. We all knew each other well. Swami just mingled among us in a very easy way. There was no distance. So he did not like what I did. And he called Swamiji and told Swamiji what I'd said and how outrageous it was and how really he ought to keep me in a small box and never let me out of his sight. You know, my leash was much too long. So Swamiji comes to me and he tells me, you know, what happened. And he repeats to me how the gentleman had described the incident. So the first thing I said to Swami is, you know, sir, it didn't happen anything like that. I had been inconsiderate, but I had not been a moron. I had been presented as if I were a complete moron, which I'm not. And so my response to Swami, I was a minister at that time. I said, sir, I'm going to hand in my resignation as a minister. I quit. You know, I just quit. it's too crazy. I can't just, and I was half joking and half serious. It was just too much. You know, I was very well intentioned and this person had just distorted everything. I quit, he said. Swami said resignation rejected. So that was not an option. But then he said to me, he said, God reads the heart. And that's something Master had said to him. And I had to say, until that moment, I didn't know what it meant. God reads the heart. I just didn't know. Swami said, you are responsible for your intentions, he said. You cannot be responsible for how they are received. Now, of course, you should not be an idiot about how you present your intentions. So it wasn't like I got off clean. But in this world, we cannot control anything. I mean, on a macro scale, I saw I think the most heartbreaking image I've seen coming out of Ukraine is this beautiful young girl dressed in a lovely evening gown, a red evening gown. And she's posing, and behind her, she's posing outside. Behind her is a totally bombed out building. This is her prom dress. That was her school. And it's just like, 2 months ago, she went out and bought this beautiful dress. Now, what is she going to do with it? That she's still alive and that she still has it is wonderful. But what is she going to do with it? That's the macro scale. It's happened in our lifetime, not that far away from us. In your country, in my country, we're still just living pretty much as we've always lived. Gasoline has doubled in price. Food prices are astonishing, but I'm still living exactly the same life that I've always lived. It hasn't touched me on that level. On the more personal scale, how many times have you said something to someone and had it completely misunderstood? How many times have you entered into something with great hopes and then just had it never turn out the way you wanted? How many people have died in your life that you really wish they were still with us? How much can we control? God reads the heart. If we're actually just thinking about why were we born and what is the purpose of life, we have all these things that we have to do. Our Sri Yukteswar describes it as on the pathway to purity of heart, which is blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. On the pathway to purity of heart, and this is all I know from the holy science, there are basically, I believe, 5 stages of purification of the heart. The second, Sri Yukteswar calls propelled, which is a very interesting word. Compelled is probably a better word. We are compelled to participate in this world because what we have to learn, we can't learn unless we are intensely engaged in the material world. What we're trying to learn is the causal and the astral level, but we can't learn it, it's too subtle. Once we pass through the lessons of the material plane, we don't have to come back to it. We can learn in the astral and the causal. But if we're here, we're propelled. We're propelled into this world, we're propelled into interactions, but not so that we can control them, but so that we can understand that God reads the heart. How do we stay even-minded and cheerful in the face of so much that's so terrifying or distressing or raises compassion? Or, we're raising children, we have aging parents, we have beloved friends and sweethearts. It's impossible the heart is propelled. We can't be uninvolved with them. But on some level, we have to live not in the manifestation of the energy only, but actually in the intention of the heart and the faith that God is working with us. Because our magnetism is everything. Our energy is everything. And quantity and quality of energy, that's our first responsibility. We have to be very energetic in this world because there's a downward pulling force. And the Gita describes this over and over again. You can't escape from the clutches of delusion by doing nothing and therefore making no mistakes. As the Gita puts it, inaction is an action. It gets very funny in English, but that's how he puts it. So people think, I'll just drop out. I won't accomplish anything. I won't have any relationships. I'll just hide. But the act of hiding is the energy you're putting out. And that hiding is not freedom. So we have to be open, courageous, fearless, giving in every respect, knowing that our actual and only responsibility is the quality and the quantity of the energy. Now, of course, if the quality and the quantity is in tune, then we're also likely to have good result. But good result depends on your karma, your past karma, as well as your present actions. So all we have to think about is, what is my vibration? What is my intention? And when we align that, remarkably, everything else begins to follow from that. And if we're only just trying to make it work, and we have to, the external world also tells us, it's like a measuring ground. It's like, am I doing this right? You can't always tell just from externals, but it doesn't hurt to look. If you're constantly failing, you have to ask yourself, what might I be doing to cause me to fail? And sometimes it's residual karma finishing itself. But the first question is always, what is the quality of my own consciousness in this situation? Even in the past, Swami tells this interesting story about how in when this was when Master was living, I think it was in Arizona, there was an SRF meditation group or center or something. And apparently the leaders were behaving in a way that was truly nefarious. I don't know whether there might have actually been financial mismanagement, taking of funds. There was some objectively egregious behavior. And this disciple named Mr. Jaycott stood up at one of the meetings and denounced the wrongdoing, and those who had failed were driven out, or whatever it was. And Master commended Dr. Jaycott for having the courage to rescue the center from the bad energy. But then after that, he said, but it would have been better if you hadn't been angry. And then Swami finished the story later, where eventually that man actually got out of tune and left the spiritual path, because it was the right action, but with the wrong energy. And the anger was more who he was than right action. And gradually that energy put him out of tune. So it becomes a very interesting way to weigh and measure things. You know, that doesn't mean we never speak up or we never stand up, and we can't always wait until it's perfect. But our responsibility always is, what is my consciousness, and how close to ideal can I make it? And that's where the art and the science of the spiritual life meet. Because if we wait till it's perfect, we will be hiding, and that won't be a good action either. But if we do the best we can with the best intention, that's where Swami said that to me. Even if our action is less than perfect, if our intention is good, what am I really trying to accomplish? Now, that's as much as I can say in this period of time. There's obviously a lot more that could be said. Do we have any questions that we would like to have answered?
Yes, thank you, Asha. That was really beautifully said. It was so nice to hear this topic so deeply. I just have so much I wrote down and want to start applying. Well, just so everyone knows, you can write the questions you have in the chat. One question, just to start with, this is a really good question, actually. It's about Kali Yuga and how it's named Kali Yuga. So does the word Kali have any relationship to that age of energy that is connected to that
From Narada.
goddess? Yeah, from Narada. that
As I
question.
understand it, in this context, Kali means dark. I mean, there's also the goddess Kali, but I believe, and I believe that's why it's called Kali, is because it's the dark age. It's the darkest of the 4 ages. Dwapara has the marvelous meaning of second, and Treta has the marvelous meaning of third. So it's really, there's nothing really special. They sound really classy to us, but they're not. And the 4th age is Satya, which means truth. So you have the dark age and you have the age of truth, and in between you have the 2nd and the 3rd. So Kali is matter, Dwapara is energy, Treta is thought, and Satya is consciousness. So we get progressively more subtle. And then we have then consciousness descending, thought descending. And that this explains all these unsolved mysteries. How did they actually build the pyramids? What are the carvings on Easter Island? What about the footprint of a shoe with nails, a leather shoe with nails, fossilized in a piece of rock? You know, there's just, this is all in the Yugas book that Crystal Clarity publishes. Fascinating. It all makes sense if you realize that there was a time of tremendous advancement, and the mysteries of it, the myths or mystery of Atlantis and how it sank into the ocean, Lemuria, all these things. It's all true. It's just, when you go down to the nadir, all the libraries are burned, all the knowledge is lost. And then we start trickling up the other side. And here we are again. And it's when we meet on the level of the downward cycle and the upward cycle, we begin to understand things. We haven't quite reached the point where the pyramids were built. Swami's unequivocal statement that it was the power of sound. They built it by moving everything with the power of sound. He wrote the book, The Time Tunnel, which is just a children's story. And in it, he had people go back and forth in time. And he said, and we agreed, that the fun of writing fiction was he didn't have to justify his intuitions. He could just put them out there. So he talks about the building of the pyramids. He talks about Atlantis, and he can just say it, but it was not made up. So there's just so much that's fascinating. Yeah.
And Asha, while you're on that, Alexandra, because I guess it can relate, just to relate the connection between the chakras and the yugas. Maybe if there's an ability to elaborate a bit more between the connection.
I have heard people say that you can make, that this chakra is that this yuga and so on. I never heard Swami talk about anything like that. My own feeling is, of course, you can always go, matter, energy, thought, consciousness. That's pretty easy to do. But every chakra has both a downward pulling dimension and an upward moving dimension. And so every chakra actually contains the potential for the entire yuga cycle. You can't really say that any chakra is a yuga, because that chakra, the energy of the earth element, let's say, which stands for security, which is the first chakra, you can understand by understanding the yugas what it means to be immaterial, but the concept of the first chakra is security. So security is a basic human need. So the question is not security as Kali Yuga or Dwapara, it's what do you look to for your security? So you can look to matter for your security, or you can look to truth for your security. And so each chakra can go any direction that you want to go with it. So personally, maybe somebody can direct me to a source where I can make the yugas work. But when I've heard people talking about this, I just have to say, well, I would really like to hear what you've done. And I'm wide open to hearing something I don't know, because of course I don't know more than I do know, but I haven't been able to make that one work. Wait, there's one more thought there though. Oh yes. I used to give a class that had the title Personal and Planetary Evolution, which is a very, because they are two different things. So inherently within us, we have in the human nervous system has the capacity to perceive infinity. That's what makes the human body more valuable and more important on the evolutionary scale than any other body, which is disappointing to the people who love the whales and the dolphins and all of those great beings, but they may be very refined, but the nervous system of those great mammals is not capable. You can't have an avatar in a dolphin body. You need a human body to be able to perceive infinity. Okay, so that human body, no matter what its context, no matter what yuga, no matter what planet, no matter how dark, it still can reach infinity. So the yuga cycle is, to my mind, is an external reality independent of the chakras, because the chakras are the messenger system from incarnation to incarnation to carry the karma. The karma registers in the chakras. We reincarnate, and we could die in early Dwapara and then go to a planet that's in the bottom of Kali Yuga, if that's going to serve our spiritual needs. And then we can reincarnate in Satya Yuga. When Swami asked Master if we always come to Earth, we always incarnate in Earth, Master said, oh no. He said it just like that. Oh no, there's countless planets to go to. And all of them are in a galaxy that have a yuga cycle, because this is the way creation is made. So it's a backdrop. However, that doesn't mean that you can't study the yuga cycles and see countless ways where that template also informs the inner life. And so I would put it like that. And after that, if somebody can teach me how to correlate the chakras and the yugas, I'll be delighted to learn. But I have my doubts so far, so I want my doubts to be settled by somebody who settled them. Okay?
That's really good. We have another question from somebody new. And if there's time, we'll get back to anyone who's written more than one. But there's at one point you were sharing, this is from Monica. On some level, we have to live not only in the material, but in the faith that God is working with us. And their question is basically how to clear our thoughts and raise our consciousness to be able to live in that faith that that flow is happening. And I think it has to do with quality of energy too.
The answer to that question is, Master said, take care of the minutes and the incarnations will take care of themselves. It's a very, very boring answer. It's a terrible, boring answer, because there is no shortcut. There's no secret that anybody is holding back on you. I'm not, Monica, I'm not singling you out, but there was a gentleman who lived in our community for some 20 some years. He now lives in a different community. And he attended all my classes, great friend, great personal friend. I love the guy. He was great to have in class. He asked lots of questions. I gradually figured out that he was basically asking one question every time, which is basically, have I been here long enough for you to tell me that there must be a shortcut and you've just been holding out on me all this time? And I gradually realized it was always the same question, even though he fooled me for years, because they were interesting, well thought out. But the intention behind every question was, isn't there another way? And of course, Kriya and this, you can study all this, but it's a long, hard slog. That's the only thing I can say. We used to call it, when I first joined the Ananda and I went right into the monastery, and we were this marvelous group of about 6 or 7, the core group of women who were all renunciates, and we lived this life together for about 10 years. And we were mostly all 24 when we started, or 23. We were just the same age, the same spirit. We looked alike. We had a great time. We threw ourselves into it with masters, realized, God, sure, we can do this. Renounce the world. Sure, we can do this. Why not? And we just, the way I put it is, we saw the beautiful island out there without thinking at all, we just dropped our luggage, ran into the ocean, and started to swim like a crazy person. And we swam and swam and swam and swam and swam and swam and swam. And somehow that island just never seemed to get any closer. And there was sort of a point, and this, this is how it felt, where we were all just like conferring. And I put it like we all stopped swimming and started treading water and having a conversation. Like, it's too far to go back, and it looks pretty far to get there. And we're just treading water, wasting time, wondering if there's a shortcut. And finally had to really accept, no, there wasn't. So we define that period. Here's the goal of God realization. Here's the absolute wonderful zeal of first discovery. And this is what's called the icky middle. And it's just this long period where you're just in the icky middle, and you know all the teachings, you're really working with it, you're extremely happy to have found the path, you're thrilled to be the disciple of a great master, and it's just a really long way. And it's just a really long way. And that's why out of 1,000 who seek God, actually I saw it recently, out of thousands who seek God, only one finds. Because when you really realize that there is no shortcut, that I'm just going to have to hold steady and persevere. And what choice do I have? It's even worse than that. It's like, I can't go back because I'm too far from shore to go back. It's just, I can't go back. And I'm deep into this. And now, so we used to call it master's bait and switch, is what we actually called it, which he drew you in thinking it was effortless. And then by the time you were too committed, he switched to explaining it to you that it wasn't. It was going to be a lot longer and harder. Now, that there are a lot of long days and nights. There are a lot of long days and nights, and there's a lot of moments where you think, will I ever get this right? But this is how I comfort myself. Self-realization is infinite. Delusion is finite. Therefore, even if I have 1 million horrible errors to make, it's only 1 million. And each time I make a terrible mistake, I'm taking one off of that tally. And if I just keep taking them off the tally one by one, then I will reach the end. I absolutely will reach the end. So that's one part way. The second is, and this is, when Swami was asked, what is the secret to success on the spiritual path? He said, the realization that it's a life or death matter and you have no choice. And that sounds draconian, but that's really what I've come to. I can be unhappy, I can rebel, I can, just lie on my bed and eat chocolates, for days at a time, or the equivalent of that. But in the end, what choice do I have? And then you think, well, we just persevere. You just have to not quit. People ask me now, what's the secret? Don't quit. 2 words. Don't quit. Don't worry about doing it well. Just don't quit. That's 100% all that you have to do. And God will do the rest.
What a better fitting to a beautiful time with you, Asha. That was so, yeah, I'm speechless. Wonderful, beautiful. We are out of time with your time, Asha. And once again, it's just love sharing your knowledge, wisdom, energy, light. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And I'm sure I speak for all of us.
The honor and the joy is mine. And if you also liked it, that's bonus too. Okay. But it's just, I love sharing these teachings. So
we really look forward to being with you again, and we'll be sure to share with everyone when we know, and just
sure.
Thank you.
You know how to find me. You know how to find me. Okay. God bless you all. So lovely to spend time with you. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Asha. And if anyone has any questions, please email us, and get it out there, and maybe any topics for our next time would be wonderful.
Yes.
Okay. God bless.
Everybody.
Okay, thanks.